Hello, everybody. I'm John Atack, and I'm delighted to introduce Jefferson Hawkins. Hi, Jeff. How are you today?
Hey, John, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Mm. It's a real pleasure. I read your book, Counterfeit Dreams,
Ah,
some years ago and was very impressed. I think it's one of the truly significant books. It's memoirs about time in Scientology because the thing that fascinated me, the thing that absolutely fascinated me, was that you proved that L. Ron Hubbard's policy doesn't work. That when you came to actually take this age-old book, a 1950 book, a badly written book, a confusing book, a book that Ron Hubbard himself a year later cancelled the method in it because it's hypnotic, and
yeah,
yet
yeah,
you managed to take this book and get it back on the bestseller list by
yeah.
avoiding all of Ron Hubbard's policy about marketing and PR. So,
I know. I had to jettison all of the marketing policy
mm,
to do that because it would be impossible to do if you tried to follow Hubbard's so-called marketing
mm,
technology.
yeah,
Um, because he didn't know the first thing about modern marketing.
mm.
You know,
Yeah. I
he
mean,
was.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say he was a good showman, Hubbard, and he knew how to get people stirred up and all that sort of thing. Very
Mm.
charismatic gentleman. But in terms of modern advertising and marketing, he thought he knew all about it, but he didn't know anything about it.
Mm. Hey, for me, it was one of my first experiences in Scientology. I got involved in the end of 1974, and the marketing series was just coming out. And because I
Yeah.
didn't have any money, the people at the Birmingham Scientology Mission wanted to give me something I could do, and so they gave me the marketing series. And
Uh-huh.
I read Positioning Philosophic Theory, I think it's called something, about Reese Trout's Positioning the Battle for Your Mind, and
Yeah.
went,
Yeah.
oh, he's recommending this. So I went and bought the book. And the book didn't have anything to do with what he thought positioning was. And so I had a very early taste of that kind of went, I need to be a bit
Yeah.
careful about this guy. He, has
Yeah.
lots of bombast, but doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily
But
know he doesn't necessarily take the time to understand things.
yeah. I met Jack Trout
Uh-huh.
in New York. He was going to do a campaign for Scientology.
I heard about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's in my book.
Mm.
But
Drop the religion angle. Yeah.
yeah, he said drop the religion angle, concentrate on like success stories,
Mm.
testimonials, and that
Mm.
sort of thing, which was good advice.
Mm.
But of course, you can't tell Scientology not to be a religion.
Yeah, that was Hubbard's delight. This thought, that
Yeah.
we Russell Miller and I between us we found four people who in 1949 Hubbard had said, "Oh, if you want to make a million, start a religion." And Scientology's response to that was, "Oh no, George Orwell said that." And
Hmm.
that just makes my head spin. The thought, oh, nobody can repeat something that's already been said. So that
Uh,
proves it. That kind of, oh, what are you going to do with that? So how did you get into Scientology in the first place? Let's go all the way back there.
all the way back, I was in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area, and I was a hippie. I was a full on
Mm.
anti war hippie. And I was going to anti-war marches and that sort of thing. And in those days, the main outreach of Scientology was FSMs going out to people's houses and giving lectures,
Field staff
which
members. Yeah,
which nobody does nowadays. They're
thankfully.
forbidden from doing that. But that was, I could tell you from you know, a viewpoint of being in the marketing area, the two things that have always gotten people into Scientology are books and word of mouth.
Mm,
Well, they've stopped selling books.
mm,
except selling Scientologists the same books over and over again. That's their book program. And they've stopped any word of mouth. In fact, Scientologists are instructed not to talk about Scientology. And all of their celebrities, they make a big deal that they have celebrities, but all of their celebrities, none of them will talk about Scientology on the air. They have it in their contracts. If they go on a talk show, you're not allowed to ask Tom Cruise about Scientology, which is ridiculous because word of mouth has always been the number one way to get people in. And that's how I got in.
Yeah.
Is a couple guys came up from LA Org. They didn't even come to my house. They came to another guy's house, and a friend of mine happened to be there and heard the lecture. And by the way, one of the guys that came up was Mike Maurer.
Okay.
He was only about 15 years old. He came up with a professional FSM, and they gave a lecture. And my friend was very impressed by the lecture, and he sort of told me about it, and we decided to go down to the Los Angeles org the next night and see what it was all about.
When was this?
This was in the end of 1967.
Okay.
And so we went down to the org. There was a guy, I don't know if he's still around, a guy named Seton Thomas.
Good to know.
Who was at LA Org at the time. He was an impressive lecturer, this guy. And he gave about an hour intro lecture, which included showing some clips from the Introduction to Scientology movie, the one with Hubbard and Tony Hitchman.
Yeah.
So he would interrupt his lecture, throw that up on the screen, and we would hear Hubbard talk for a bit, and then he'd shut it down, give some more of his lecture, and this would go on and on. And he was a mesmerizing lecturer, He was, and there were a lot of great lecturers at that time in the late 60s, people who could really give a lecture. And in fact, pretty much every Scientologist at that time could have given an intro lecture on the spur of the moment. Let's talk about parts of man. Let's talk about ARC. Anybody could have gotten up and given a lecture on those subjects. I mean, I could probably get up in front of a group right now and give a better lecture on Scientology than any of their current spokespeople who are non-existent, Yeah. So it was word of mouth. And so I got interested in it. As I said, I was like big into the anti-war movement. And they were saying, oh, yes, well, that's what Scientology is all about, the solution to war. And I said, oh, okay, I'm listening, tell me what you got, And I read a bunch of books. It was the first thing I did. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. This makes sense. This makes sense. And there's an interesting point here, which is that there's an essay that Hubbard wrote, and I think it's in the book New Slant on Life. It's called How to Study Scientology. And he says, okay, what you need to do is find something you agree with, then find another thing that you agree with, and then find another thing that you agree with. And that, of course, is a hypnotic technique. It's used by salespeople. They'll get you nodding right up to the close. So I was into that. I read the books, and then I went in for a comm course, and we did TRs, and I thought that was terrific, because I was a very shy person. I was not very good in social situations, and I never dated until I was at college.
Mm.
You know, so I was kind of a prime candidate for a communications course. And
Yeah, I mean, if I can interject at that point,
yeah,
after I left 40 years ago and have then spent the next 12 years doing what I could to help people who'd left. So I've talked with a lot of people who've left. And I started kind of isolating, why do people join? And shyness is, that's about 30 or 40% of people. They join because they are not socially adept, because
right.
our educational system doesn't teach you anything about how to relate to people and communicate with them.
Yeah, totally. And my twin on the TR's course was a very attractive girl. So I was immediately like, But by the end of the course, we were conversing easily, and with ARC and all that. And I was like, wow, this stuff really works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was hooked.
Yeah, and I think it is. Again, I asked the first year after I left, because you could talk about it suddenly. You could ask people what they did on the OT levels and that kind of stuff. And so I just get into this routine thing of saying, what was it that convinced you that Scientology was a good thing? And for most people, in fact, I think everybody I talked to, it was either training routine, particularly training routine 0, or they'd had an experience in a book 1 session later on, people who joined in the late 70s. And those experiences were often quite profound. And more recently, I've got a chapter coming out analyzing the techniques that are used in groups to get people, in repetition, fixation, mimicry, 3 things that Hubbard was really good on. You can get people into a euphoric state by doing this, and you feel great.
Yeah.
And you want more.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think one of Scientology's biggest draws is that temporary euphoric state.
Yeah. Very good indicators.
Yeah, and very good indicators. And I think that's the reason why Hubbard said the minute you get a floating needle and VGIs, end the session.
Yeah.
You have to end the session right then. Why? Because they're in a euphoric state, and they will come back for more of that.
Yeah, milk the high, and people become auditing junkies. You get this thing of that they're looking towards the next session. One of the things I talk with a lot of people who are doing transcendental meditation, again 35 years ago or something. And one of the things that came out was that there were people who were getting so high on their meditating that they ignored their children and they abandoned their work. And this is like cocaine. This is like somebody plugging into, I've got to get this feeling, which is probably a dopamine rush or something.
It's addictive,
Yeah.
That euphoria is addictive, and you have to get more and more and more. And Scientology plays on that because they say, well, you're at level 3 now, and we have to get you to level 4 and then 5 and then 6, and then you'll be king of the universe,
Yeah, you'll be as great as Ron Hubbard himself. Oh no, not quite. You'll never actually be able to discover any technology. You'll never actually be a god maker like Ron, but you can be a god as made by Ron. Yeah. It is incredible to me looking back. It's a long time ago, but I did through to OT5, operating state and level 5, before I left. And for 9 years, I absolutely believed. I was never on staff. I was never in the Sea Org. I didn't have any money, but I was treated as a celebrity because I'm an artist and a writer. And so I had a very easy time of it for 9 years. And when I came out, I couldn't understand why people were so scared. When I first met Jerry Armstrong in 1984, he said the tone level of the Sea Organization is fear. And it's like,
it's true. It's true.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
And this bizarre thought that all of these claims of superhuman capacity and wonderful ability are made. None of them are fulfilled. They've never been fulfilled. He started promising them with the state of clear, and then he got, by 1952, we're going to get you 3 feet back of your head and do all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody got these things, but we all believed.
And we thought everybody else was getting it, and there was just something wrong with us that we didn't get those incredible results.
Yeah, and the trick that you're not supposed to use your superpowers.
Yeah, and you can't talk about them.
Yeah.
I
mean, there is just something that happened to me when I went to the Birmingham Mission. It was being run by Don and Stephanie Ryburn. And they were away and trying to find out why it was that the American mission holders were making so much money, and they weren't doing business. And so when they came back, I'd been going for about 6 months or something. I was doing the Hubbard qualified Scientologist course, and lovely people, getting on with all these people doing this crazy stuff. Stephanie Ryburn just gave me this withering look the first time I met her. And she'd done the OT levels with Hubbard, and she was a class 8 auditor and all this stuff. And I don't remember her ever smiling at me. I don't remember her ever calling me by name. And you're there and you're going, this person can read my mind. They've done these OT levels. Oh, no, they can read my mind. And as soon as you think somebody can read your mind, things start getting a bit haywire in there. The years went by. That was 1975. In 1982, I was on OT5, and Stephanie was on OT5 as well. And she came barreling out of the waiting room with a big grin on her face. She called me John, first time she'd used my name, I think. And she was really friendly, which had not happened before. And what she said was, isn't it brilliant that Ron's come up with something that clears up the mess that OT3 makes? I'm kind of, so the reason you were so distressed from the moment I met you is because OT3 had screwed your head up. And, after that, after I left, I met a lot of people who had a very bad experience with OT3.
Yeah.
Indeed, Haywards Heath Mental Asylum, which is the closest one to St. Hill, they reckon they got somebody about once every 6 months who'd completely gone. And they invited me to talk to them about how they could help. And knowing that these are people who work a very long, arduous week, 14 people turned up to see me talk because they were so concerned about the state that Scientology was getting people into. So I've come away from this group that's, phobic about psychiatry. And here are these people involved in psychiatry who just desperately want to help. And we're quite willing to go, we won't give them any sedatives because they're scared of drugs, and we won't do this, and they will probably calm down. It's an acute psychosis. But promised everything, and you end up with nothing. And so, I mean, this we're not going to get through your whole life here, but you join in 1967. You're shy, and how long was it before you joined staff?
I actually joined staff in June of 1968. And I was working at the time in Los Angeles as a graphic designer. And I would get these mailings from Scientology, these magazines, the little magazine, and they were so awful.
Certainty and things like that, communication and certainty and all this raft of little.
And they were very poorly designed and written, and they were just horrible. And so I went down to the LA Org, which was downtown on 9th Street in LA. And I said, listen, I'm a professional graphic designer. Can I help, upgrade your magazine and, make it look like something? And they were like, yeah, sure. And they took me to the back room and they gave me the shooting boards from Worldwide. And I said, okay, I can see where the problem is. The problem's not here. The problem's at Worldwide. So I said, well, tell me about this Worldwide. He said, well, they're in England. They're at St. Hill Manor. and they make all the books and they do all the magazines, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, then that's where I've got to go. I've got to go to Worldwide in order to be of use to Scientology as a graphic designer.
Yeah.
So I packed everything up, and my brother wanted to come too, and another friend. And the three of us took a flight. We went to New York, and then New York to London. And we arrived at St. Hill, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to clear the planet. And and they said, oh, well, the publications people are no longer here. They've moved. But you can join us here at St. Hill. And I was like, well, no, that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to go to the publications place where I can do some design work and that sort of thing. And they were like, well, they're up in Edinburgh now. You know, the pubs org had moved up to Edinburgh. And there was an AO there and a Class 5 org, Happy Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, the first delivery of OT3 off the ship was at the Advanced Organization in Edinburgh with David Mayo and Captain Bill.
Yeah, yeah.
I recollect, yeah.
So we took the train up to Edinburgh, and we found the publications org, which was on Thistle Street Lane. I don't know if you know Edinburgh at all, but
only very slightly. Oh.
Yeah. But there's Queen Street, and then there's an alley behind it called Thistle Street, and then there's an alley off of the alley called Thistle Street Lane. And so it was this little cobblestoned alleyway, and there was an old door in the middle of a wall that said Publications Organization Worldwide. So we had made it, you know. So that was where I joined staff. And actually got to work on the magazines.
And did you move from there over to Denmark when publications went there?
We had been there about a year. And then there was a big panic because in Australia, they had seized the book stocks. The government had seized the books. And at that time, Pubs was supplying all the books for United States as well, and all of Europe and South Africa. We were like the book people.
Yeah.
And the Sea Org was concerned that the English government might seize all the books, which would shut everything down. So they said, okay, Pubs has to move to Copenhagen. And they say, and you have to do it now. And it was just, we were up for a week with no sleep, packing books, packing books. We had, those big container trucks lined up along Thistle Street Lane and packing the books. In fact, in my book, I have a picture of that in progress.
Go with Ron Biggs and John Sanborn. I knew Ron Biggs reasonably well, and I interviewed John Sanborn along the way.
Yeah. So that's Ron Biggs and John Sanborn and Foster Tompkins packing books into those big containers. And then we packed all the desks and everything else and printing presses and took off for Copenhagen. And I was in Copenhagen then for like about 6 years. And then and mostly doing the design and writing, which was what I was sort of most useful at. And I got married, had a baby daughter. And then one day we got, I think it was an article in the Flag Orders of the Day. And Hubbard was forming up a marketing unit on the ship. And he says, as part of that, he said, get Hawkins from Denmark. See, so he already knew who I was, And of course, you don't turn down a summons like that. So I was off to the ship in 1975. And I'd been there before. I'd been to the ship before because I did my FEBC training in 1971.
Which is the Flag Executive Briefing course, a very long and arduous course.
Yes, all of the secret knowledge of how to boom any organization, which was crap. It was total crap.
It was when it was being run by Jay Hurwitz, yeah?
Yeah. And Jay Hurwitz, he was the soup. And John Horwich was his deputy.
Yeah.
Deputy soup. Yeah, so that was an interesting program. I met a lot of, sort of top Scientology people. Yvonne Gillham-Jentzsch was there, and I got to know Yvonne, and a lot of Bob Harvey. I don't know if he was in PAC for a long time. So a lot of people that were there for that course that, they were the top people in Scientology at that time, Bill Franks, Kerry Gleason, they were there, So anyway, so did that and then fired back to pubs in Denmark as the commanding officer, which lasted about a year. And then I was booted off and sent to the decks. And then I was rescued off of the decks by Ken Delderfield, who was the head of pubs at that time. And he put me back on the designing and writing area. They wanted to put me into finance for some reason, but Del just axed that and said, you'd be wasted in finance, which is true. I'm not a finance person.
Yeah, and I mean, having developed graphic skills in a place where there were very few people who understood graphic design, that's
Yeah, exactly. And then we went to the land base, went to Florida, and I became the editor of Advaned Magazine when I was in Florida. Did that for a year or so.
I was probably reading those while you were editing them in 75, 76.
Yeah. And I had a lot of fun with those magazines. They were, I did all the designs, I did all the illustrations, I wrote all the articles. It was fun.
and they were professionally made, unlike the things that led up to them. Of course, they had the execrable L. Ron Hubbard photographs on the cover sometimes. I'll never forget the Aztec sacrifice, which is from about 77 or something. But, and somebody who was on that shoot said he sure liked blood. There was red corn syrup everywhere.
Yeah. Lots of blood. But so I was on that. And then fast forward a number of years to the early 80s. And the Guardian's office was disbanded after Miscavige and his crew took over.
Well, I think to be accurate, the Guardian's office was disbanded by Ron Hubbard. That Ron Hubbard still had control at that point. When I left, I was absolutely of the opinion Hubbard was gone. But the research I've done since suggests that Miscavige, until 1983, was just doing what he was told, and doing it in the nastiest possible way, of course. But Hubbard was the driver, and he basically got this. I talked with people who are involved. I talked with Kerry Gleason. I had stuff from Bill Franks, Ira Chalef, about Alan Walter and his attempt to basically take over the Mission network. And Hubbard heard about this. And there was this idea, there was the Mission Holders Conference in 81, where the Guardian's office people admitted that they'd been spying on the missions and messing with them. And they all got friendly. And Hubbard feared that the Guardian's office would form some, and you get another Ampronistics or Dianology or, one of these many splinter groups. And of course, that's exactly what he promoted. That's why the about half the membership left in the early 80s
Yeah,
because of Hubbard's paranoia that it was going to happen. But
totally. Yeah. And because the missions were making a ton of money at that time.
Yeah.
They were huge. A lot of the missions were bigger than the orcs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and the income flow was massive. Ben Corridon, I think, had $900,000 in his accounts and a $2 million building at Riverside when it's taken.
Yeah.
And he wasn't at the top of that particular tree. There were, a number of Kingsley Wimbush, various.
And you can't make that much money that is not going to Hubbard.
No, and it was only 10% that were going to Hubbard.
Yeah.
That's not good enough.
Yeah, so... and Miscavige was of the same mindset. You can't have that much money floating around that's not coming to me. So he did the whole mission takeover and essentially destroyed the whole mission network. It doesn't exist anymore.
Killed the golden goose and stopped all recruitment in Scientology. I talked with Jesse Prince, who was running the tech side of Scientology in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And he said that although I'd stopped believing in Scientology in any way, somehow was still defending the independents from attacks from the mother cult. And Jesse said that the completions for the 7 people who were working as independents in East Grinstead were more than the completions, training and auditing for the whole of St. Hill, which had 180 staff. And it just demonstrated that whole thing of, it's rather like the Nazi regime, that you've got people spying on people are spying on people. So you had a flag representative and an L. Ron Hubbard communicator, a Guardian's office person, all of these people who don't actually produce anything other than reports on everybody else.
Well, that's Scientology.
Yeah.
It was the same at the Ant Base.
Yeah.
For every person actually doing something at the Ant Base, you have 5 or 6 people that are just running around, ticking boxes on programs or whatever they do, holding musters, doing conditions, blah, 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 doing ethics handlings. So the number of people at the Ant Base who were actually producing anything was maybe 20 or 30 people out of 300. And the rest of the people were either hiding or doing busy work, That's the way Scientology is. But the other point is that every major program that David Miscavige has carried out has destroyed the thing it was supposed to handle. If you look at it, his handling of the missions destroyed the whole mission network. His handling of tech, golden age of tech, destroyed tech. His handling of management destroyed management. There is no management anymore.
Just him and his slaves in the hole.
Yeah. And so everything he touches fails. And yet nobody notices that.
But the one exception to that, and the important exception to that, is like they can't recruit anymore because people will go and watch South Park, and your friends will laugh at you. So they're not recruiting. They're preying on the kids of the whales and getting them into the Sea Org, which is a really stupid thing to do. But they still have people like Trish Duggan, who is said to have put $360 million into Scientology. So the organizations are nothing. All they've got is these kind of Potemkin villagers, the ideal orgs. But they've got these people who are now, they go on stage every year to boast about how much money they've been bilked of from Scientology. Kind of, how on earth does this continue? But so that's the one thing he seems to be good at, is getting huge amounts of money from these people.
For nothing, money for nothing. Yeah, because all of those ideal orgs, according to reports from all over the world, they're all empty.
Yeah.
They're just big, echoing mausoleums.
Yeah.
And this is expansion, quote unquote, Oh, look at all these buildings we have. And, they never say that, well, they're empty, But when I left in 2005, and when I left, I had access to all of the int graphs, all of the int stat graphs, and Scientology had been steeply declining since 1991. Yeah. I mean, steeply declining. And when I left in 2005, it was still going down. And I don't think it's recovered.
No, I mean, the only membership reports we've had from the inside were in the 80s. And that showed that the full paid membership for the International Association of Scientologists in 85, I think it was 25,000 people. That was it. And I think you put some numbers on with the campaign you ran for Dianetics, probably. But I think since then, we're probably less than 20,000.
I think so.
The UK census, I think, showed 1,100 people who claimed in 2021 to be Scientologists.
I know. It's so small now. There was a stat, an org stat called Bodies in the Shop, if you remember that.
I do, yeah.
Which is probably the best indicator of how many active members they actually have.
Yeah.
Well, when I left, it was around 18,000, 16,000 to 18,000.
Yeah.
The international Bodies in the Shop.
Yeah.
So that was all the members they had in 2005, and it's only gone down from that. So yeah, I think it's under 20,000, probably well under.
Yeah.
And the other thing is they have no way of keeping track of people who have left under the radar. You know, there are people, most Scientologists simply withdraw. They stop going to course. They stop getting auditing. They stop going to events, and they're just like, okay, I'm not out of Scientology. I'm still a member in good standing, but I'm just not doing anything right now. They go on and on for years, and we call them under the radar, and Scientology calls them offlines. Offlines. These people are offlines, which means they're done. They've quit. And they're always trying to recover these people and, you know, book a case remedies and all that, run them through this process and that process, get people back. We got to get all these people back. Well, they're not coming back. Yeah.
And you get whole families where I talked with a woman 10 years ago who said that she had not dared to tell her siblings that she really wasn't interested. And I think she said it was 7 years went by. And then she said something to one of her sisters, and her sister went, "Oh, thank God, you too."
It's true. It's true. There are a lot of Scientologists, and my brother and his wife fit into this category. They both thought that the other one was so committed that they couldn't possibly discuss leaving with them. So I had a long conversation with my brother after I left the Sea Org, and I told him all the stuff that was going on, and he was like, "Oh, that's just terrible," and so forth. And then a couple of days later, his wife called me, and she says, "Listen, I got to talk to you. I don't want to be in Scientology anymore, but I can't talk to Kim about it because he's so, you know,
gung-ho."
Yeah.
Gung-ho.
And there's so many families that are like this. They can't talk about it. And I told my brother's wife, I said, why don't you talk to Kim about it? I said, I think he'll be more receptive than you think. And 24 hours later, my brother calls, we're out.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
And all it took was just connecting them together. Yeah.
And it shows you, you know, how invasive this thing is. I've talked with a couple, Henry Bonchonsky. I'm losing his name, but Bonchonsky. So Polish, lovely, brilliant guy, loved the guy, and his wife Pam. And I went. This was, I don't know, early '84, and sat with them and said, you know, there are problems in Denmark, the state of Denmark, and this is going on. And Henry sat there very apprehensive. And I knew Henry well. I'd known him for years, and we were good friends. And he said something like, "Oh, terrific." And I'm sort of, what's going on? And it came out that he said, "I saw OT3 in, I think, 1969, 14, 15 years before. And I thought, this guy's completely insane. But my wife loves this stuff." And so they ran a guest house for Scientologists who were going to St. Hill year in, year out. And being at the table at that moment where Henry realized that he could say to his wife, "This is rubbish. This is nonsense." And, you know, that in an intimate relationship, being that closed off that you dare not say it. Vaughan and Stacey Young, when I talked with them, kind of exit counsel them, I suppose, they'd stayed in, again, I think it was for 7 years, without daring to tell the other they wanted to leave.
Yeah. Well, when I was at the base, I could not talk to my wife about the stuff that was going on. I mean, she knew the base was a horrible place, and everybody was hateful and vindictive, and it was horrible place to work. And you know, we talked about that a couple of times, but her solution was she wanted to become the base chaplain so she could smooth things over. I mean, you know, she really had a heart of gold, you know.
Yeah.
Her heart was in the right place. But, you know, I was out of there. I didn't want to stay there another day, but I couldn't tell her about that. I couldn't say, "This is a horrible place. You and I go," you know. So I just went by myself, you know.
Yeah. So I imagine of the kind of 1,100 people who've declared themselves to be Scientologists in the UK census, that probably about half of them it's just somebody looking over their shoulder.
Yeah.
Put the dog's name in as well. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Cool. I would I think we can wind up around here, as long as you promise me that I can come back and talk to you again.
Absolutely. Anytime. Just let me know.
Because
we can go over the Dianetics marketing in more detail if you like.
Yeah, I would like to do that. So let's call it quits for now, and we'll get together in the next month or two and do some more.
Great. That sounds perfect. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you. It's been lovely spending some time with you. Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.